So my speech will be on the role of cybersecure audio in safety and security applications. And you will see that in the area of cybersecurity, innovation plays a very crucial role to keep us safe. What are the key messages of my speech? Well, first of all, cybersecurity is for audio applications extremely vital in a lot of vertical markets. Secondly, in cybersecurity, do not count on one single measure, but use a multi-layer of different measures. And very key is to think about reducing the attack surface. So what kind of systems are we talking about? So we talk about IP-based audio communication systems, and they consist of centrally, usually a converged IP network, and connected to this network there is the public address voice alarm, which is within our group, the Zenital group. ESL is a brand that has a strong reputation of public address voice alarm products. So there you have a communication into a wider area, usually in a one-way direction. To this network, there is also connected IP speakers. IP speakers are used in smaller zones to have dedicated information broadcasted, but they often have a built-in microphone as well, which can add a lot of value to be sure that the environment is monitored and that the audio is broadcast in the right way. Also, in these kind of ecosystems, you have IP help points and intercom systems. And of course, there you talk about a two-way communication system. So this is the kind of audio systems that we as Zenital offer that's fully IP-based. And then if you look at the wider ecosystem where this is part of, these systems are, of course, connected to access control, video surveillance systems, but also fire alarm intrusion systems. And then often being part of a global building management systems, as one of the previous speakers was also mentioning. Now, to monitor and manage this remotely, there is, of course, an internet access as well. And then often also cloud services are integrated in the total solution. Think about a text-to-speech application, for instance. So this is the kind of applications that I'm talking about. And that is also what my company, Zenital, is offering worldwide. So if we now think about these integrated IP communication systems, why are they so crucial? Well, actually, these systems are keeping people safe, and they are enabling everybody to hear, be heard, and be understood everywhere and every time. The advantage of audio is that you listen in 360 degrees, you catch everything that is happening in the environment, and you have a big advantage that you can easily do a two-way communication. Now, what is important for well-functioning systems? Well, first of all, there's of course the audio quality is key, but also proven reliability, availability, redundancy. And these are not topics I'm going to talk about today, but I'm going to talk about a fourth dimension, what is crucial for these applications, and that is cybersecurity. Now, what are common types of attacks in cybersecurity? Of course, it was already mentioned earlier today, the loss of data and data being stolen, and that is a very crucial dimension of it, of course. But on top of this, there is the operational dimension, which is a bit more typical for this kind of systems. So, because if a system is hacked, it can become inoperable, which would mean, as the system has a safety dimension, that the venue or the location cannot be used anymore. But it can also, of course, be used to cause panic, to lead to misinformation, or even be used as a mass acoustic weapon. And actually, an example was not too long ago in California. A leading retail pharma chain was hacked. The PA system was hacked. And actually, they needed to close down all the stores because of very loud and inappropriate content. If you ask me which kind of inappropriate content was broadcasted, I'm not going to tell you because telling it would be inappropriate. But be aware that if something would happen here in this venue, there is a safety angle, but there is also a well-being and even the entire use of the venue would be for a certain period not possible anymore. So why are these IP audio systems increasingly targeted? Well, first of all, they are used on a day-by-day basis, which gives them a large effect in case of being hacked. But there's also other elements that play a role. And of course, it's all IP-based, digital, using the existing IT network can lead hackers to take advantage of this. You have, of course, the off-site control and monitoring, which gives an access for hackers. And then the cloud services also make sure that there is this potential uncontrolled area or risk effect. The last topic is also very important. The industry has, of course, a lot of AV integrators that might not be fully up to speed on this kind of more IT infrastructure dimensions of the business. So knowledge at AV integrators and AV manufacturers is also playing a key role for this. So be aware that everything is always up to date, up to speed. And I give an example of a hacking of more than 1.5 million cameras that were being hacked because these cameras were still running on out-of-date software. So updates of softwares are, of course, very important to stay cyber secure. So what kind of applications are being hacked? And actually it can happen to every industry. Now studies show that government, energy, finance, medical, retails, and also public entities are mostly targeted. But actually hackers, they look for vulnerabilities. They don't look for a specific industry. And therefore, they look for the smallest effort to having the biggest impact. And don't think it will not happen to me. The Hawaii Emergency Agency experienced that. And of course, the emergency agency is there to keep the people safe in Hawaii. But what happened is that on national television, one of the guys was interviewed, very proud to explain his job on the surveillance of Hawaii. But actually, there was a small post-it below his screen mentioning his password. So be aware, never think it won't happen to me. It can be in a small corner that the issue pops up. Now, what is cyber defense? Cyber defense is, of course, the protection or the coordinated protection by reducing the attack surface. And when we talk about attack surface, we talk about all the uncontrolled points in a system. And what are uncontrolled points in a system? If you think about an audio system, then of course, by definition, you have equipment where the people are. And you have loudspeakers, if there are IP loudspeakers, can be hacked, of course. There are intercoms, there is cabling, but also an uncontrolled entry point can be the internet access, of course, or other related systems such as the video surveillance or access control systems. So all these uncontrolled, potentially uncontrolled points can be a risk. And it's key to identify them, to manage them, and to, of course, take away the risk. And what I will show in the remaining part of my presentation is that it is about the defense in-depth strategy, to work with a multi-layer strategy on cybersecurity. But before we go into this, let's first look at a few standards that we use to define this defense strategy. The first one is ISO 27001, which is protecting, safeguarding your organization and the information assets of your organization. So it's a set of rules and policies that you develop to follow, to enable you to make sure that the organization or your own organization is following good guidelines. And it's a lot about people behavior as well. It's a combination of technology and people behavior. And for instance, there is actually a website where you can see how many devices are still running on the default password. And I was surprised to see that of a leading IP video manufacturer, 18,000 devices are still running on the default password. And actually that website that screens it, you can even see where they are. So if you want to make the life of hackers easy, then bad behavior is certainly an enabler. Of course, you have other standards, and one of the leading standards is the IEC 62443, which actually comes more from the IT side. So it's about servers and workstations as a basis, but we in the audio industry, we use this as well as a guideline for our technology and the subsystems. And in this standard, you have different levels. For instance, as from level 2, it's not possible to keep the default standard, the default passwords anymore. So this is just a small example how there is different levels of compliances as well. So that's an important takeaway to look at, not just being compliant, but also the level of compliancy. An important guideline for us is also the CIS benchmarking. It gives a lot of good practices on, for instance, configuration approaches. There's a lot of other customer-specific, product-specific guidelines and standards as well, which are very valuable. It's good as a company or a manufacturer like we are to comply the most relevant standards, and then of course look at this on a case-by-case project basis if there is additional requirements needed. So let me now get to the core of the defense strategy, because in the past, a lot of people thought that cybersecurity was about having a good firewall. They thought, okay, we have a good firewall, and then we can trust everything that happens in the network. It, of course, still remains very important to have a good firewall, but do not count on one single measure. And what we are doing in our systems is to have this multi-layer defense strategy. And these are basically data-centric technologies that we use to defend the system against various attacks. So it's a lot of building blocks, and it's a more holistic approach. And let me show you a few of these building blocks. So the first one here mentioned is what is called signed and secure software and firmware. And you actually start from a principle of zero trust. And then you look at what happens in the system. And for instance, one of the things is, of course, there is data being exchanged. And then we use a digital signature procedure with an asymmetric key encryption, meaning that the data is encrypted and has a key, an asymmetric one, so a different key in different direction. So this is one of the building blocks, one of the additional measures to be sure that the system is much harder to hack. Another measure is, for instance, the enrollment of the devices. So you again start from a zero trust principle, and if a new device is enrolled in a system, you have a secure managed system that is identifying the device and make sure that there is only communication between trusted devices. I'll take another example on data ports. If you have data ports that are not used, disable them. And the ones that are being used, make sure you monitor them. Again, a building block in the cybersecurity strategy. I go to another example on firmware updates. Firmware updates, it's incredible key that for major firmware updates, there is a physical on-site authentication needed. So if you have this principle, then again, you keep away some of the hackers, and it's again another building block in the defense strategy on cybersecurity. Let me take one more, system auditing and system logging. Very key that if there would be an attack happening, that you can detect it very early. So detection is also incredible key, and then the monitoring of the system and the logging of everybody who is doing something in the system with their credentials. And then I get to, there's a few more building blocks, and I could probably go on for a little bit longer, but I know it's lunch after this presentation. But there is one thing mentioned here, there's ongoing commitment. And I think well, we all know that hackers always develop and get smarter. There will be new vulnerabilities that we don't know today. So this defense strategy might in a few years look quite different. And I think the key thing is that the ongoing commitment from us as a manufacturer, but also the integrator, the end customer, to continue develop on this. And so there is a continuous innovation need that you put on this kind of topics, and if a new vulnerability is detected, it's extremely key to openly communicate to this, to say to the integrate the end customer, look, there is something, there is here a risk, we are now working on this, and we get to another building block, another measure in our defense strategy. So to conclude my talk, I hope I could make clear that the role of cybersecurity in audio communication systems is extremely vital for applications, certainly in critical infrastructure applications, that you have, well, it's our responsibility not to count on one single measure, but to work on a different layer, a different number of building blocks, to have a strong cybersecurity defense strategy. And secondly, well, work on reducing that attack surface and make sure we can also detect and prevent attacks. So thanks a lot for your attention. Thanks a lot for having the opportunity to giving this speech in this fantastic event. Thanks a lot, and looking forward to talking to as many of you as possible. Thank you.